Awesome. All right, welcome. So yeah, as you're joining in, write in the chat where you're joining us from. I see you're already represented by Australia and New Zealand. As people go joining, I'll just start with what is quite common here in Australia, as we do a welcome to country. I'll just bring that up.
Welcome to Ngambri country. I am the daughter, granddaughter, and a great-great-granddaughter of this land, and I welcome you here, the land of my ancestors.
This is the place where we share stories and our dreaming. I like to share my knowledge and my stories and my beliefs. Welcome to my ancestral country. This is the place of the Ngambri people.
Yuadumarang, Yilangalangu, Kibabango, Wugabu, Migabu, Dear Nilbug Mayini. Ngambri Wogalu, Mayini Gayambanya, Ninyoga, Narambungu. Ngambri Wogalu.
The tradition of welcoming the people to country is a practice that was handed down by our ancestors, old people and elders from the beginning of time. Before entering another person's country, you'd first announce your arrival and not enter until a traditional owner formally welcomed you. This was to protect your spirit whilst in another person's country and also to show respect for the country of which you're entering. So, in the words of my people, Yumulundi, Yununga, Yerebu Yungu, which means you may leave footprints on our land. In other words, welcome to country.
Dara Nunna, Dara Nunawal, Yumulundi. In language that is, this is Ngunnawal country, and welcome. My people, the Ngunnawal, are the traditional custodians for Canberra and surrounding areas in New South Wales, a country that's been occupied for at least 21,000 years. It's important to us that you recognise that this is Ngunnawal country and understand and appreciate how significant the land is to us as Aboriginal people. Country to us holds a strong connection. We belong to the country, to the land.
And also, like, it's not just sort of our First Nations people that welcomes to country. We even got some of our organisations that are sort of recently jumping on board. And this is an example of the Canberra International Airport and how organisations can, you know, embrace welcome to country.
We're starting today with rolling out the Welcome to Country in the international terminal here at Canberra.
A Welcome to Country is a traditional Aboriginal protocol that ensures that once welcomed, your body and spirit are protected whilst on another's country.
When we go to anybody's home, we knock on the door and we are welcomed inside. So it's particularly important for when people are returning home to Canberra or visiting Canberra from other places, because it's a spiritual blessing.
What the airport is doing is acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional owners of Canberra.
Having travellers come into Ngunnawal country, it's our responsibility as traditional owners to make sure that they are welcomed and protected when they come in. I believe that it's a fantastic way in today's age that the old protocols are brought back into the custom.
Aboriginal people have been here for thousands of years and still exist today. I think to me that's the biggest thing, that international visitors know that there's a traditional people here the First Nations people, and that they still are today practicing their oldest living culture in the world. And, you know, we really want international visitors and Australians to start to connect with that.
This is a totally doable thing. There's probably no more complex an entity than an airport. And if an airport can do it, then a shopping centre can do it, a stadium can do it. And so what we'll see is increasing visibility of Australian Indigenous languages right throughout the country. But it also speaks to the really important and central place that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities occupy in Australia's story.
When I was a child growing up, we weren't allowed to share our language. And that was a way of protecting children, because if you spoke language, there would be a reason to take you away.
It's a long journey, but it's days like this makes it more their acknowledgement of the noble people. So,
Yuma, Yumalundi, Yangu Galani, Nalawiri, Nanawaldara, Wangarali Jano, Maran Balan, Bugabang, Yumalundi. Hello and welcome. Today we are all on Ngunnawal country. We should always remember to listen to and be respectful of our elders. Welcome.
Hey, stop using these for ear cleaning.
All right, awesome. Cool. All right, so I'm going to keep this not on full screen so I can see the chat, which means you'll be able to see the chat. But here we go. Awesome. I'll pop that on the left-hand side so you're not interrupted. And let me have a look. Here we go. Fantastic. Got 6 people join us. So thank you for coming along. I appreciate your support and your interest. If you joined while we had the welcome to country, feel free to jump into the chat and say hi and where you're joining us from. Welcome David. David was first in. He gets the prize from New Zealand. Our friends over the ditch, as we say. So I'm going to try and sort of debunk, woohoo for sure, David, debunk a bit of a myth that you have to be tough and mean and bossy to be a leader. So, you know, I'm a proven test case that you can actually be a leader and get things done and still be kind. So, you know, if we could imagine a world where most people would choose to lead with kindness, it'd be brilliant. Your parents, your work boss, your community leader, your family, your friends, and you, showing kindness, empathy, or compassion as a boss is often widely criticized as being weak. Trust me, it's possible to be kind and an effective leader. So what would it look like if we ourselves lead with kindness? What would the impact be for diversity? What will we achieve towards equity, and who would benefit from better inclusion? So that's kind of what this discussion today will be. Also, warning, heads up, I'm a bit of an interactive speaker, so I'll be asking you to drop things into the chat or speak up if you're feeling confident. And I do have some ready to go questions should you not have any for me. So don't worry, there won't be crickets when I call out for questions. Okay. So David might like this shout out to his Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. So if I'm asked like who's a similar sort of leader that kind of follows the same sort of ethos I do, it's Jacinda Ardern. She's been quite vocal in her sort of her ability to be able to provide leadership with compassion and empathy. She doesn't need to, you know, be bossy or aggressive or assertive, and often she's been criticized for not doing so. But I think her standing on the world stage is certainly quite well respected. And here is her in a Maori cloak, visiting our joint former head of state, Queen Elizabeth II. And in the background, you can see current King Charles III with the recent handover. So I'm going to do a little bit of quick thing about me, but it's not about me as in, what do I do? It's about me and how I kind of, in different roles, have kind of I've developed my professional leadership skills or, work ethic, all those sort of things. So essentially about me, it's just two things really. I'm dad of two loving and caring young kids, and essentially I work to provide for them. So that's my main focus. So everything I do is for them. So they come first, but doesn't mean that I don't strive to have a rewarding and fulfilling career, and also a personal life away from the kids. So in a nutshell, I've kind of got 4 separate careers where I've kind of progressed over the last 20, 25 years of my career. So shout out to the people from the United States of America. I started as a cook at McDonald's, which we refer to McDonald's as Macca's. So I was a Macca's cook, flipping burgers. But what I learned there is a tremendous hard work ethic. I was working there sort of in the mid to late 1990s, which Americanization in Australia was very big. So McDonald's was extremely popular. It's also where I worked was the midpoint from Sydney to the snowfields. So 5, 6 a.m. would be bus loads of people coming in wanting to get their burgers. So I learned to always be doing something. So, if there's a quiet bit, you're cleaning or you're prepping, for when it's going to be busy again. So the benefit of, working in such a sort of well-known organization for working hard was that it effectively demonstrated without me actually saying anything for future interviews in any job when I was using McDonald's on my CV. Brilliant. So then, I moved into what I sort of classify as my career when I studied a diploma of graphic design and became a graphic designer in Sydney. So I kind of worked on some sort of household brands in Australia, AMP, Whiskers, Optus World, and also some Westfield shopping centres, and some signage around some pretty popular sort of places in Sydney. So you may be aware of Pitt Street, a quite famous street in Sydney. So a lot of my designs were filtered through that street and surrounding streets. Also, I found that it was really important to communicate clearly and also be genuine and authentic. It's quite a field where there's a lot of marketers that are trying to sell things for the sake of selling them, where I was making sure that I had integrity in what I did. So I learned a lot about leading with intent and communicating in a way that was genuine. And then I moved into a career in government policy and programs. I could list off a whole bunch of achievements, but the big one, the one I'm most proud of, is improving telecommunications resilience in regional areas here in Australia. During, you could talk about many natural disasters, but it kind of kicked off with, you may have seen the 2019, 2020 bushfires that rocked the East Coast, where many people were stranded without mobile phone coverage and access. That means access, to other things like ATMs, and petrol and a few other things. Like, was very difficult for people to do. Also, communicating with their loved ones or with emergency services. So I during the midst of the bushfires still burning, I could see them from my house. Also, as COVID came in and hit the entire world and shut down, there was storms and floods and plenty of other natural disasters, but I was able to secure within government quite a substantial package to improve the telecommunications resilience in those areas, with some extra battery backups, extra sort of temporary facilities, like which are called a meows and cows, but it's essentially the temporary infrastructure, and also some national broadband network, sort of roving trucks that kind of would become sort of Wi-Fi hubs in evacuation centres. What is probably most pleasing for me is in the following effectively natural disaster season, which has been floods here in Australia, that actually there's a clear examples where it actually saved lives, the work that we that I led and put through and the team and implemented. So but what I've learned mainly in my government career is you don't need to be a bad guy. Like everything that I've done has been with kindness. I may lose my temper every now and again, but I just find that the results don't end up coming through if that happens. But also, I'm really conscious that I have a lot of power in my government role. So I'm very conscious, to also put that with a bit of kindness, bit of care and compassion. And if I'm talking internally, I'm very open and to people working how they want to work. I don't change things for the sake of changing things. I change things or make suggestions where there's an improvement. Also, I recognise that people have a life outside of work, so I definitely encourage them to go to their kids' school event or go to that doctor's appointment that they've been putting off. As well-rounded individuals, but also through industry is really looking to them at leading the way as well and being kind to their position and really putting myself in their shoes, where often they're in quite difficult circumstances and need government to come in and help with a market failure or with something that's not quite working. I'm currently in a transition to essentially my fourth career, which is becoming an organizational executive coach. And that is partly because I think my most impact within government so far has been through coaching. And I think I can really sort of have more impact with helping people lead in a way where there could be more kindness in the world. So that's sort of my career, and it's kind of, gone along with my education as well. So I mentioned my graphic design degree. Also did a Bachelor of Art History and Creatorship, and I learned so much about other people's perspectives, diversity, and sort of inequalities, and the importance of inclusion. One thing I really resonated with me was, with different religions and different perspectives, is just looking at this is what Catholics believe and this is what Buddhists believe, and just having a real sort of openness and understanding to their beliefs. And also to those that don't believe in religion, or are agnostic, or have other strong beliefs, like strong belief in science, and a few other things. So it's about, for me, just embracing and getting great understanding of diversity, which was very brilliant. And the good thing about doing art history over history, I'm a bit of a visual person, so the lectures were a bit more easy to go through when you've got some lovely art on the screens in lectures. I'm also in the process of doing a Masters of Business Administration in Executive Stream, and I'm picking up a lot of stuff on leadership, management, strategy, which is making such a huge difference to sort of what I'm doing, but also what I'm sharing in my LinkedIn posts as well. I'm trying to share the learnings I've got with more of a mass to help people in that thing. And also, yeah, I'm a certified organizational coach, mainly because my executive coach said, go and get your certification. You're a really good coach. So I've done my little training to get that formal qualification. But what I did do is I met a whole bunch of other coaches. They're in the same space for the same reason. And that is to have a positive impact on as many people as possible. It's really good and quite a collaborative and supportive sort of network. That is quite beneficial for me. Also in my volunteering community work, you probably see a theme with the first two. I'm a parent of 2 young kids, of course, but I'm also co-lead a Canberra Dads Playgroup and Man with a Pram, which is about getting dads out there with their kids and chatting to other dads and being sort of supportive of each other. I'm also on my kids' parents and citizens executive committee, and that's about sort of getting more resources and more sort of parent input into school decisions. And also I have volunteered with Relationship Australia to help with some parenting courses for new parents. So you can probably see where my passion is in that space. So I'm going to pause there. And I do have a request from David to have more LinkedIn photos of mans with prams. So heads up, I am going to do probably like a 1-minute video behind the scenes of Canberra Dads Playgroup probably in the next week or 2, and I'll post that on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'll make sure that I bring the pram so it gets in the video for you, David. So awesome. So do you have any questions about me before we kind of kick into the sort of the juicy bit of my talk? I'll feel free to write your questions to your chat, or you can raise your hand, which means I need to find the participant thing to see if someone's raising their hand. I think. All right. Oh, here we go. That's a good question. Do you have a particular leader you followed? So I don't have a particular leader, but what I've done over my career is picked up the best things of many leaders and kind of reappropriate them, or kind of sort of tweak them a little bit to go through my sort of personality and style. So I would say I'm the best leader, but it's that's for me, but it really is a combination of a lot of bosses and colleagues that I've sort of taken on. So for instance, an example right now is I've done some work with a business coach, and what I loved was that she said, just write your questions in the chat. And so I've taken the best thing that I got out of what she's taught me and applied it into this session. I suppose if I had to pick one particular one that I'm really focusing on now, that might be known particularly in the United States of America, is Brene Brown. I'm currently listening to her Dare to Lead podcast, which is quite informative, and she's brought in a lot of leaders to come through. So I'm slowly, like same with my approach, I'm picking up the best of each leader that she's interviewing on the pod. And one of them is something that I'm doing, and I do this in my connection call chats that I have with people that book in, is if I can't help them, I try to leave them in a better position than when we first started. So for that, someone was asking for some help and I really couldn't help them in that space, but I passed them on to someone that could and gave them some hints on where to go next. So that's the most recent thing I've picked off somebody else, but yeah. And I'm finding a lot of leaders on LinkedIn are sharing their beautiful sort of perspectives, including you, David. I'm loving your art. So, and your thoughts with your strategy sharing. Cool. Any other questions before I move on? Cool. Let's move on. Okay. So we sort of put my sort of purpose and mission in a nutshell. I've really been focusing on this in the last 6 months. I'm really focused on being an authentic global leader, using data and coaching to help organizations support mid-career parents to dream, believe, and achieve their work, family, and personal aspirations. So I'll put a question to you. You could put a Y or an N or a yes or a no. Where are you with your purpose? Do you know your purpose? It's okay for a no, for a yes. Whack it in. Excellent. David's got his, which is fantastic. Brilliant. So it's really important, I found, to really think about like what your sort of overarching purpose or mission is, and I'll go into a bit more detail about that. But common question I get is, because I do put that I'm an authentic leader, is what is an authentic leader? These are the 6 key principles, and this is some learning I'm sharing from my master's studies. But it's Professor Bill George. He's eminent. If you're not aware of him, jump on and check him out on LinkedIn and grab one of his books. He's fantastic. Oh, thanks, Campbell. Yeah, you're finding your purpose. That's good. That's really good. So the first one is authentic leadership is built on your character, not your style. Authentic leaders are flexible with their styles. They choose the most appropriate style to suit the situation. Authentic leaders are real and genuine, and they don't feel fake it until they make it. They are real people who are comfortable expressing vulnerability and uncertainty in the right situations. Authentic leaders are continuously growing. They have a growth mindset. They're reflective, self-aware, and self-disciplined. They experiment with different approaches to leadership, including styles, to extend their comfort zone over time so that they can feel more comfortable being themselves in different leadership roles. They also seek feedback and support from others. Also, authentic leaders match their behavior to their context. They are emotionally intelligent leaders who are self-aware and socially aware. They are able to self-regulate their behavior and manage their emotions. They skillfully balance a desire to be transparent, trustworthy, and honest with the need to be strategic, diplomatic, and respected. So from this perspective, being oneself requires skill and finesse. Also, number 5, authentic leaders are not perfect. They stumble over words. They look to the right when they're reading something, or nor do they try to be. Authentic leaders make mistakes, but they also acknowledge such mistakes and learn from them. Authentic leaders also are sensitive to the needs of others. They care about serving others and seek feedback from others to help them to do this better. And I kind of also like to share like how I lead. These are kind of 6 things that kind of intertwine with being authentic and a few other things. And something I really picked up recently on another leader is, and really reflected on, is for me, trust is the starting point. So you have my trust, you lose my trust, but you get my trust as a starting point, which, does occasionally cause some issues, but I find that the benefit is, and the reward is far greater than any possible negative. Also, with people that I work with or reward their initiative with greater autonomy. I find that, if they're willing to go and sort of move things, then giving them a bit more autonomy gives them a bit more confidence and a bit more incentive to continue to use their initiative, which, there's only so many hours in the day that one person could do. So if you've got a whole team that's really looking at things, it's a really good way of sort of making a positive impact. Also, work smarter, not longer. So I'm a big thing of, if you're tired, go and have a nap if you can, or take some downtime, because quite often when you come back, you're working at a faster speed. Also, I'm big on embracing technology. So one example recently is I've implemented using Calendly, calendar with LY instead of ER, to organize my appointments, which means I've saved a whole heap of time of toing and froing between messages or emails to set up meetings. So there's plenty of ways to work smarter, and it's something I encourage. And also, I use varied strategies to achieve results. So something that I really try and work out, have really honest conversation with anyone I'm working with, whether they're in my team, they're a colleague or my boss, is to kind of find out how they best work and kind of tailor my way of working to kind of get the better outcome. So I've noticed that my boss at the moment, he leaves at 5, but he jumps back on about 7 p.m. and just clears some easy stuff. So I've worked out that if I hold what I've got until about 6 p.m, and I'll whack it to him, that's top of the pile and it gets cleared, and then it moves on, and that's a good way to move things. Similarly, I found that if I have someone I'm working with that's in a bad mood, I hold that back. And instead of setting them work, I actually show them some compassion and ask them how they're doing. And also I tailor to different audience. So always the first thing, if someone's saying I need to communicate with someone, can you help me out? The first thing I work out is who their audience is. What do they like? How do they like to receive the information? What makes them tick? But I suppose the big thing, and I suppose the word but is not as more of an and, is that I'm guided by core values. And as soon as I sort of identified these core values, it became a great way for me to know when to say yes and when to say no to things. Because when you start in your career, you got plenty of time, potentially could be single, no kids, you can do long hours and still go. But yeah, as you get older, you have more responsibilities, so really your time becomes quite valuable, and you can only do so much. You can't help everyone unless you as a detriment to yourself. So big advocate for self-care. So one benefit I've found from developing my core values is it's a lot easier for me to be guided in making decisions of what to do and what not to do. So here's an insight to my 5 core values. So I've got right in the chat, what are your core values? And it's definitely okay if you don't know. Use this time as you're listening on the recording or live now to think about it. You don't have to have the answers, just have a think about it. So my 5 core values is my family. And this has evolved because I started with family, and then there was some discussion I had about what does family mean. And there is some work cultures where family means work and you're a part of the family and it's all kind of encompassing. So that's why I added the word my So it's about my family. My family is my priority core value. Health and well-being as well is right up there. That's my second one. And really 1 and 2 are very interchangeable because I've got to look after myself to be there for my family. 3 is continuous learning. You see me shouting out a lot of people on LinkedIn. I just love it when people are starting a new course or completed some training because it's really important to continuously learning. It's one of the myths that you come out of school, high school, or college or university that you kind of have all the answers. Definitely not. I definitely know that that people on this call and in my networks that towards their twilight years are still learning and still benefiting from that learning. So continuously learn, and you'd be surprised when you think you know all about a subject and you go along to a talk or a course and you just learn something else. So definitely keep learning. 4 is respect, and this is respect in 2 ways. So I've made a difficult call recently that I will not engage with people that don't respect me. That's something that I put down, and that's why it's become very clear and become a very strong core value for me, is also I show respect. So anything before I send something, I have this in my mind, is this communication respectful? If the person that I'm talking about sees this, will they think it's respectful? Also, a big thing you probably got through is integrity. It's, I think a quite common thing is what a good way of explaining integrity is, what will you do if no one's watching you? So what do you like? Yeah. So if are you going to do what you said you're going to do when no one's looking, or are you going to do something that's sort of appropriate? However you want to determine appropriate when no one's looking. But also having integrity is also sending a signal to others that I'm keeping my integrity, which does stop you from being into some difficult situations and sort of judgment calls you need to make, particularly as a leader, when there are some pressures from other areas to perhaps do something you don't want to do or you don't think is right. But yeah, so integrity is another one. And I see David has jumped in with honesty, empathy, integrity, quality, and respect. Fantastic. They're brilliant, David. Awesome. So everyone else, have a think about your core values. They're really, really important, and they'll give you a nice guide to, how you want to go forth as a leader. So this is probably for some people on the recording. But definitely jump in if you're on the live chat. So what I want you to think about is, as professionals and new leaders in tech, how will you embed kindness in technology, data, user experience, or social good? So feel free to jump in the chat. And when I say the chat, I also include the comments in YouTube. So feel free to jump in. I'll jump in every now and again and engage with you. So as promised, question time. So feel free to jump in with a question. We've also got 5 here ready to go, but I thought that, if I was you, I would ask. So jump in. We've pretty much hit number 2, I suspect, with David's question earlier on. But yeah, feel free, jump in a number in the chat, or take yourself off mute and fire away. Cool. We'll kick off with number 1. So I have asked myself, You've worked in the Australian government as a public servant for 18 plus years. What mechanisms are in place to promote DEI? And when I'm saying DEI, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Australian government is structured in a way where it's broken up into probably a dozen or so departments of state, but also some smaller agencies with specific purposes. But what is across the government are some networks that work within their own Department of State or across Department of State or both. And we definitely have a First Nations, or what's also referred to Indigenous network, or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander network. We definitely have an LGBTQIA+ network. Also, we have disability networks and a lot of other sort of minorities. And these sort of structures are usually with a senior executive as the champion, as the chair of quite a formal committee, but also you can sign up, anyone can sign up in an organisation to be an ally. So I've definitely been quite a vocal ally in the disabilities network and the organisations that I've come through, and definitely been an ally for the LGBTQIA+ network. And what this does is like it policies, sort of organizational policies and events raise awareness and add their perspectives into minorities that may be drowned out through majority. And that is quite an effective way to highlight and promote and implement diversity, equity, inclusion. Cool. All right, David. Often junior leaders have monitoring roles. They seem focused on metrics rather than the people. Are you seeing any moves to provide more training in being people focused? Yeah, so junior leaders have monitoring roles, absolutely. There is a focus on metrics. There is a big push, certainly here in Australia, in Canberra, to be focused on the people. There is a lot of focus on leadership skills, emotional intelligence in leadership. But I'm finding, interestingly, it's a bit of a swing away from management training. So what I'm sort of seeing is people getting better at sort of leading the people, but actually losing that sort of skill set in that sort of junior thing of the management skills, like setting up the structures, the processes that give them enough information to make decisions as a leader. And I'm finding that there sort of needs to be a balance shift to have management, but certainly junior leaders that I'm seeing are really aware of the people management. They definitely need some practice and some skills in that. And I'm finding that some of the senior leaders, at least where I'm seeing, could learn a little bit from the junior leaders in that approach. Ask this as if junior leaders are metric driven as they are promoted, how do they adjust to being more people focused? Yes, I think I answered that, but if you've got any examples of some junior leaders challenges, I'm happy to address those as well. Good question, David. Cool. All right, question 3. I'm not sure leading with kindness all the time is authentic. Do I have to fake kindness? Definitely don't fake it. It's very obvious when you're faking to be kind. Sometimes what I sometimes do is just go away for 5 minutes, whack on YouTube, guided meditation, put your earplugs in, close your eyes, do some breathing, cool down, and yeah, often you're good to go. If you're not, sometimes giving that direction, having that communication the next day or the next hour is very appropriate. But we're a human. Like I'm preaching lead with kindness, but I do make mistakes. It's about owning those mistakes and saying sorry, apologizing genuinely, and asking that person, like, how could I handle that? Is kindness included in your performance review? How could a business measure the impact of kindness? Absolutely. It's not in my performance review, but that is a very good suggestion, David. How could a business measure the impact of kindness? So I undertake in an annual staff survey, which is called the Australian Public Service Census. And it's quite, I would, off the top of my head, whack in a question saying, how often are people kind? Or how often your leaders are kind? And quite common answers are always, often, sometimes, rarely, never. That is potentially one way of measuring it. And then first time you get the baseline, and then you see whether there's improvements or negative movement in kindness. But also on the performance review question, we have formal performance reviews every 6 months, 12 months for an entire plan. But the way I lead is, if you're saving it up for a performance review, then you're not doing your job. So you should be ripping the Band-Aid off as things happen and learn from them. So I regularly check in with my team once a week, together and individually, and quite robust. I'm just honest. I deliver it in a kind way, but if they haven't hit the mark, I just say, that didn't quite hit the mark. How can we do it better next time? But I never go in with an intent to be judgmental. It's more of a conversation about, it didn't quite work. What can we learn from it? And let's try something else. And that also, if they've done an amazing job, I tell them immediately and very loudly. So all the bosses and bosses are quite aware of such good work that someone in my team, my colleague, or even my boss or my boss's boss has done well. Cool. All right. So isn't showing kindness a sign of being a weak boss? A lot of people put this forward. I don't agree with it. I think I've found when I've worked in a very high pressured situation, I was working in the Australian Parliament House, and if you've been reading the news recently in Australia, you can have a bit of a search for some of the culture that's there at the moment. It's quite a difficult place, and I was a conduit between the minister's office and the department where I worked. And I would have people call me up, telling them all the problems with the world, with our local broadcaster's bias, shouting me down the phone. And my approach was to listen, be compassionate, be kind. It was quite difficult after getting a bit of an ear beating to then jump off the phone and take a call from your former boss wanting something quickly, and flip into, this person's not yelling at me. This person wants some help. So that was quite a challenge. Also, ministers and minister staff are very time poor. It's actually harder to be kind. And when you're in that situation, you realize that being kind, it takes longer. I find if you can spend the time to be kind, then you're going above and beyond what someone that doesn't appreciate or respect kindness is going. So, okay. This is a conundrum business has with customer experience. It is really hard to measure, and so business cases for replacing systems is done on cost savings, not improving the CX. customer experience. I suspect the same is for employee engagement. We could invest in empathy training, but more likely it is in metrics. You don't need to read or answer this. It's just an observation. Well, I read it. And I will give everyone 30 seconds to reflect on that. Good observation, David. Yeah, maybe put the "you don't need to read this" at the top, David. Some honest feedback for you. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. Got some reflection. So, what is the advice you can give aspiring leaders in tech? All right. Here we go. The advice. The advice. Obviously, you don't thinking I'm saying be kind, but no. Work out your purpose and your values and stick to them. So that's it. It's hard. It's hard to say no. It's hard to work out your values. It's hard, but consciously reflect on them now and often throughout your career. That's the advice that I would provide. Brilliant. Cool. All right, we're almost at time, so feel free